The ice-covered gutter crashed down from my roof at 3 in the morning, missing my new truck by inches. And I knew right then that the HOA's demands were going to end up costing someone their life. I stood there in my driveway in Burlington, Vermont, wearing nothing but sweatpants and boots, staring at the twisted metal and chunks of ice scattered across the concrete. My breath came out in white clouds as the temperature hovered around -5 degrees. The heated cables I had installed just 2 weeks ago would have prevented this. But no, the HOA had sent me a violation notice demanding their immediate removal because they were unsightly and not in keeping with the aesthetic standards of Maple Ridge Estates. My name is Quinn Winters, and I had bought this house 6 months ago in July, when everything looked perfect, and nobody mentioned that the homeowners association was run by a woman who treated the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. The real estate agent had glossed over the HOA details, and I had been too excited about finally owning property to dig into the fine print. Big mistake. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the damage, the cold making my fingers stiff and uncooperative. The gutter had torn away a section of the fascia board, and I could already see water damage on the exposed wood. This was going to cost thousands to repair, and winter had barely started. "Quinn, what happened?" My neighbor Tom came jogging over in his robe, his wife peering out from their front door. "The gutter gave way," I said, gesturing at the mess. "All that ice buildup finally got too heavy." Tom shook his head. "Man, I told you this would happen." Same thing occurred to the Hendersons 3 years ago. Took out their bay window. The HOA made them remove their heating cables too. Why didn't anyone warn me about this before I installed them? Most of us just gave up fighting, Tom admitted. Valerie Garrison, the HOA president, she doesn't back down. Ever. People have tried taking her to court, but she's got the bylaws memorized and a lawyer on retainer. I looked at the damage again, feeling my anger build. This is insane. The gutter company specifically told me that without those cables, the ice buildup would cause structural failure. They showed me engineering reports and everything. "You should keep all that documentation," Tom said. "You're going to need it." The next morning I called Frost-Free Gutters, the company that had installed my heated cable system. Mike Robertson, the owner, answered on the second ring. "Quinn, hey, I heard about the gutter failure. Tom actually called me last night. I'm really sorry, man." "Can you come out and assess the damage?" I asked. "I need documentation of everything. The HOA is responsible for this." "I'll be there in an hour," Mike said, "and I'm bringing my engineer." We documented the installation and the condition of your gutters before the HOA made you remove those cables. This is exactly what we warned about. True to his word, Mike showed up with a man he introduced as Peter Chen, a structural engineer who specialized in winter weather damage. They spent 2 hours examining my roof, taking measurements and photographing everything from multiple angles. "This is textbook ice dam damage," Peter said, typing notes into his tablet. "The heated cables were installed correctly and would have prevented this entirely. Without them, the freeze-thaw cycle creates ice that weighs down the gutters until they fail. You see this?" He pointed to where the gutter had torn away from the house. The mounting brackets were still in good condition. They didn't fail. The sheer weight of the ice was just too much. "Can you put all this in a report?" I asked. "Already working on it," Peter said. "I'm also going to note that this represents a serious safety hazard. If someone had been standing there when that gutter came down, we'd be looking at serious injury or death." Those ice chunks were essentially frozen projectiles. Mike looked grim. "Quinn, I've installed heated cables on 40 houses in this development over the years. The HOA has forced the removal of 32 of them. 20 of those houses have experienced gutter failure, roof damage, or both. 3 have had gutters fall on vehicles. 1 person was hit by falling ice and broke their collarbone. Why hasn't anyone sued? Some have tried. The HOA has a clause in the bylaws about aesthetic modifications requiring approval. They claim the heated cables are modifications. Their lawyer argues that homeowners assume responsibility for their own property maintenance. But they're preventing us from maintaining our property safely, I protested. Exactly, Mike said, which is why I think you might be the one to finally break through. You've got fresh documentation, immediate damage, and you haven't signed anything agreeing to remove the cables permanently. You just took them down under threat of fines. I thought about this. The HOA had sent me a violation notice with a daily fine of $100 if I didn't remove the cables within 72 hours. I had complied because I couldn't afford thousands in fines while fighting a legal battle. But I hadn't signed anything saying I agreed with their decision. What do you recommend? I asked. Reinstall the cables, Mike said. Let me do it today, no charge. Then go to the next HOA meeting and present the engineering report. Make them face the facts in a public forum where other homeowners can hear. And when they fine me, don't pay, Peter said. Let them try to collect. With this documentation, any judge will see that you're making necessary safety repairs to prevent structural damage. The HOA's aesthetic concerns don't override basic building safety. I agreed, and by that afternoon, I had new heated cables installed and operational. I also had a thick folder of documentation, engineering reports, photos of the damage, estimates for repairs, and a strongly worded letter from Peter stating that the cables were a necessary safety feature, not a decorative modification. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at the community center. I marked it on my calendar and spent the next week gathering more information. I reached out to the other homeowners Mike had mentioned, the ones who had experienced damage after being forced to remove their heated cables. Out of 32 homes, I managed to contact 18 families. Every single one had a story. The Patels had lost an entire section of their roof when an ice dam caused water to back up and seep under the shingles, leading to thousands in water damage and mold remediation. The Kowalskis had a gutter smash through their front window. The Nguyen family's daughter had been hit by falling ice, resulting in a concussion and a trip to the emergency room. I compiled everything into a presentation, complete with photos, repair bills, and medical records that people were willing to share. The total damage came to over $200,000 across the affected homes. Thursday arrived cold and clear. I got to the community center 30 minutes early, carrying my laptop and a box of printed materials. The meeting room was set up with chairs in rows facing a long table where the HOA board sat. Valerie Garrison was already there, a thin woman in her late 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a permanent expression of disapproval. "Mr. Winters," she said, her voice sharp. "I hope you're here to discuss your latest violation. We've received reports that you've reinstalled the heated cables despite our explicit directive. I'm here to present information to the board and the community," I said calmly. Information about safety hazards that the HOA's policies are creating. Her eyes narrowed. "The meeting hasn't started. Please take a seat." Other homeowners began filtering in. I was pleased to see that many of the people I had contacted were there, along with neighbors I didn't know. Tom gave me a thumbs up as he sat down. The room filled up more than I expected, with at least 50 people in attendance. Valerie called the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. She went through the standard opening procedures, then moved to old business. We have several violation notices to address. First, Mr. Quinn Winters of 247 Maple Ridge Drive has violated Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws by installing unapproved exterior modifications, specifically heated cables on his gutters. Mr. Winters, you were directed to remove these cables and have refused to comply. The board is prepared to impose fines of $100 per day until compliance is achieved. I stood up. I'd like to address the board and request time to present information relevant to this issue. Valerie looked annoyed. This is not a debate, Mr. Winters. The bylaws are clear. Then I'm requesting a formal hearing, as is my right under Section 12.5 of the bylaws, I said. I had done my homework. Any homeowner facing fines exceeding $1,000 has the right to present their case before the full board with the community present. She couldn't argue with that without violating her own precious bylaws. Very well. You have 10 minutes. I need 20, and I need to use the projector. 15 minutes final offer, Valerie said through clenched teeth. I set up my laptop and pulled up the presentation. The first slide showed a photo of my destroyed gutter and the ice scattered across my driveway. This happened 9 days ago at 3 in the morning, I began. The gutter weighed approximately 400 pounds when it fell, according to the engineer's assessment. It missed my truck by less than 3 feet. If I had been coming home from a late shift, it could have killed me. The room was silent. People were actually paying attention. I clicked to the next slide, showing the engineering report. Frost-free gutters installed heated cables on my home in November. These cables are designed to prevent ice buildup that leads to exactly this kind of structural failure. The company showed me documentation of building codes and engineering standards that recommend such systems in climates like Vermont's, where we regularly see temperatures below freezing and heavy snowfall. Next slide. The HOA violation notice. 2 weeks after installation, I received this notice demanding removal of the cables within 72 hours or face daily fines. The notice cited aesthetic concerns and claimed the cables were an unapproved modification. Under pressure of significant financial penalties, I complied and removed the cables. Another click. The damage photos, close up this time, showing the torn fascia board and water damage. 1 week after removing the cables, this happened. The repair estimate is $7,800. That includes the gutter replacement, fascia board repair, repainting, and addressing water damage to the underlying structure. I let that sink in, then moved to the next section. I reached out to other homeowners in Maple Ridge estates who have been forced to remove heated cables. What I found was shocking. In the past 5 years, 32 homes have been ordered to remove these safety systems. Of those 32, 20 have experienced significant damage. The next slide showed a compilation of damage photos from other homes, with dollar amounts listed. The Patel family, $42,000 in roof and water damage. The Kowalski family, $6,000 in window replacement and interior repairs. The Nguyen family, $12,000 in medical bills and emergency room visits after their daughter was struck by falling ice. People were murmuring now. I saw several homeowners nodding, and a few looked angry. Valerie's face was red, but she remained silent. The total documented damage from homes forced to remove heated cables is over $200,000, I continued. This doesn't include the countless minor repairs, increased heating bills from poor insulation due to ice damage, or the stress and safety concerns. I pulled up the engineering report from Peter Chen. A licensed structural engineer has reviewed my case and provided a written assessment. His conclusion is that heated cables are not a decorative modification, but a necessary safety feature to prevent structural damage and personal injury. He further notes that preventing homeowners from installing such safety measures could constitute negligence, especially given the documented pattern of damage. Valerie finally spoke up. "Mr. Winters, the bylaws exist to maintain property values and aesthetic consistency. We cannot allow every homeowner to make modifications that affect the appearance of the community. These cables are barely visible from the street," I countered. "They're thin black wires that run along the edge of dark gutters." But even if they were bright pink, safety has to take precedence over aesthetics. You're forcing homeowners to choose between compliance and protecting their homes from preventable damage. A man in the back stood up. "I'm Richard Patel. My family spent $42,000 repairing damage that could have been prevented by $200 worth of heated cables. The HOA has made our community less safe, not more attractive." Another woman stood. "I'm Jennifer Kowalski. That gutter came through my living room window while my kids were watching TV. They could have been killed, all because the HOA thinks cables are ugly." More people started speaking up, sharing their stories. The meeting devolved into an impromptu forum about HOA overreach and safety concerns. Valerie tried to regain control, banging a gavel on the table, but the damage was done. The community was angry and they were directing that anger at the board. "This meeting is out of order," Valerie shouted. "Everyone sit down." "No," I said firmly. "This meeting is exactly in order. These people are exercising their right to address the board about policies that are costing them thousands of dollars and putting their families at risk. You need to listen." Valerie stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "The board will take a 15-minute recess to discuss this matter." The 4 board members retreated to a side room. The community center buzzed with conversation. Several people came up to thank me for bringing this into the open. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "That was perfect," he said. I've never seen Valerie so rattled. "I'm not done yet," I said. "If they don't reverse this policy, I'm taking this to court, and I'll encourage everyone else affected to join me." When the board returned, Valerie looked composed again, but I could see the tension in her jaw. "The board has reviewed the information presented. However, we cannot make a decision on policy changes without proper review and a formal vote. We will schedule a special meeting for 2 weeks from tonight to discuss potential amendments to Section 7.3. In the meantime, what about the fines?" Someone called out. "All fines related to heated cable installations will be suspended pending the policy review," Valerie said stiffly. "But the cables must remain as they are, no new installations without approval." It was a partial victory, but I wasn't satisfied. "What about compensation for the families who have already suffered damage due to this policy?" "The HOA is not liable for individual property maintenance issues," Valerie said. "Homeowners are responsible for their own properties. Even when the HOA prevents them from maintaining those properties safely," I pressed. "That's a matter for the courts to decide if anyone chooses to pursue it," she said. "This meeting is adjourned." Over the next 2 weeks, I became something of an accidental activist. My phone rang constantly with calls from neighbors wanting to know what steps to take, how to document damage, and whether I thought a lawsuit would succeed. I connected people with Mike Robertson and Peter Chen, who offered consultations to anyone who needed them. I also did something else. I filed a formal complaint with the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development, outlining the HOA's policy and the resulting damages. I included all the documentation, engineering reports, and homeowner statements I had gathered. I wasn't sure if anything would come of it, but I wanted a government record of the issue. The special meeting arrived, and the community center was packed. Easily 100 people showed up, some standing along the walls because there weren't enough seats. Local news had gotten wind of the story, and a reporter from Channel 3 was there with a camera. Valerie looked less confident this time. The other board members, people whose names I now knew, Robert Chen, Deanna Foster, and Marcus Webb, seemed uncomfortable with the attention. The meeting started with Valerie reading a prepared statement. The board has reviewed the concerns raised regarding heated cable installations. We acknowledge that safety is paramount and that some homeowners have experienced weather-related damage. However, we must balance individual needs with community standards. Here it comes, I thought, the non-solution. Therefore, the board proposes the following amendment to Section 7.3. Heated cables will be permitted on a case-by-case basis, subject to approval. Applications must include professional installation documentation, photographs showing minimal visual impact, and a $100 administrative fee. The room erupted. People were shouting, some in anger, some in disbelief. I stood up, waiting for the noise to die down. "That's not good enough," I said clearly. "You're still requiring approval, which means you can still deny installations for arbitrary reasons. And you're adding a fee that's pure profit for the HOA. This is about control, not about safety or aesthetics." "Mr. Winters, the board has made its decision," Valerie said. "Then the board is going to face legal action," I replied. "I've consulted with an attorney." Preventing homeowners from making necessary safety improvements that protect against structural damage is a violation of Vermont property law. The state has building codes that supersede HOA bylaws when safety is involved. Robert Chen, one of the other board members, spoke up. "Maybe we should consider making heated cables a permitted feature without requiring approval, if they meet certain installation standards." Valerie shot him a look that could have frozen water. "The board votes on amendments. I call for a vote on the proposal as stated." "I second Robert's suggestion," Deanna Foster said. "We should vote on that instead." Marcus Webb nodded. "I agree. This has gone on long enough. We're facing potential lawsuits from multiple homeowners. The smart thing is to allow the cables and move on." Valerie was outnumbered and she knew it. "Fine. All in favor of amending Section 7.3 to permit heated cable installations that meet Vermont building codes without requiring HOA approval." 3 hands went up immediately. Valerie sat with her arms crossed, glaring at her fellow board members. Motion passes 3-1. Meeting adjourned. She grabbed her papers and stormed out of the community center before anyone could say anything else. The reporter tried to catch her for an interview, but she pushed past and left. The rest of the board stayed to answer questions, and Robert apologized repeatedly for the situation. "Valerie has been running this HOA like her personal kingdom for too long," he admitted. "Some of us have disagreed with her policies, but she's very forceful, and it's easier to go along than to fight. What you did, Quinn, gathering all that evidence and standing up publicly, that gave us the courage to push back." I shook his hand. "I just didn't want my house to fall apart because someone thought cables were ugly. Over the next month, things seemed to settle down. People installed heated cables without harassment. The winter continued its brutal assault on Vermont, but gutters stayed intact. My own repairs were completed, costing exactly as much as estimated, and I filed a lawsuit against the HOA for the damages. My lawyer was confident we'd win or settle quickly. Then things took a weird turn. In late January, I received a notice from the HOA about a special assessment. Every homeowner was being charged $500 for emergency repairs to community infrastructure. The notice was vague about what exactly needed repair, just mentioning erosion control and drainage issues. I called Tom. "Did you get this special assessment notice?" "Yeah, just now. $500 out of nowhere. What the hell is she talking about?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." I drove around the neighborhood, looking for any signs of construction or repair work. Nothing. The common areas looked the same as always. The small pond at the entrance was frozen solid, as it had been all winter. The playground equipment sat under snow. Nothing indicated emergency repairs. I filed a formal request for financial records, which homeowners were entitled to see under the bylaws. The HOA had 30 days to respond. In the meantime, I started asking around. Other homeowners were equally confused about the special assessment, and many suspected it was Valerie's way of retaliating for the heated cable situation. 2 weeks later, I got an envelope from the HOA containing financial records. I spread the documents across my kitchen table and started going through them. What I found made my blood boil. The HOA's operating account had been depleted over the past 6 months. Large payments were going to a company called VG Consulting Services for various administrative tasks. Thousands of dollars, sometimes multiple payments per month. There were also payments to Garrison Property Management for community oversight. I did some digging online. VG Consulting Services was registered to Valerie Garrison. Garrison Property Management was her husband's company. They were paying themselves with HOA funds for services that should have been covered by the standard dues. This was embezzlement, plain and simple. I called my lawyer, Sarah Mitchell, and explained what I had found. She asked me to scan and send all the documents immediately. "Quinn, this is serious," she said after reviewing everything. "If what you're showing me is accurate, Valerie Garrison has been stealing from the HOA for at least 6 months, probably longer. These payments aren't authorized in the bylaws, and there's no evidence of board votes approving them. What do I do?" "We need to contact the other board members first, make sure they're not in on it. Then we may need to involve law enforcement. This could be criminal fraud." I reached out to Robert Chen, Deanna Foster, and Marcus Webb, asking them to meet with me privately. We gathered at a coffee shop in Burlington the next evening, away from Valerie's watchful eyes. I showed them the financial records. Their reactions ranged from shock to anger. "I never approved these payments," Robert said, flipping through the papers. "I review the quarterly summaries, but these specific transactions weren't listed. They must be buried in the line items." Diana was livid. "She's been stealing from us, from everyone in the community. That special assessment isn't for repairs. It's to cover up the missing money." "We need to call an emergency board meeting and suspend her," Marcus said. "Can we do that?" "According to the bylaws, yes," I said. I had memorized the relevant sections by now. Any 3 board members can call an emergency meeting with 48 hours notice. And the board can suspend an officer pending investigation of financial irregularities. "Let's do it," Robert said. "I'm done covering for her behavior." We drafted the notice right there in the coffee shop. Emergency board meeting, Saturday at 10 a.m. to discuss financial matters and potential officer suspension. We emailed it to Valerie and posted it in the community as required. Valerie showed up to the meeting with a lawyer, which told me everything I needed to know. She knew she was caught. "This meeting is inappropriate and potentially illegal," her lawyer began. "My client has not been given adequate time to prepare a defense against unspecified allegations." "This is an internal board matter," Robert said firmly. He had stepped up as acting president for the meeting. "Mrs. Garrison, we need you to explain these payments to VG Consulting Services and Garrison Property Management. These expenditures were not approved by the board, and are not authorized under the HOA bylaws. Valerie's face was pale but defiant. Those are legitimate business expenses. The HOA requires administrative support beyond what the standard management company provides. My consulting firm handles special projects and oversight. What special projects? Deanna demanded. There's nothing in the records about what these payments were for. And your husband's property management company, what services did they provide? Various maintenance and oversight tasks, Valerie said vaguely. That's not good enough, Marcus said. We have documentation showing over $40,000 in payments to companies you control, with no competitive bidding, no contracts, no board approval. This looks like self-dealing at best, theft at worst. Valerie stood up abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be accused of crimes by a board that doesn't understand the complexity of running an organization like this. I've devoted years to this community, and apparently profited nicely from it, I said. I had been invited to observe the meeting as the homeowner who had brought the financial irregularities to light. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. Valerie, don't say anything else. I need to consult with you privately. The board votes now on whether to suspend Mrs. Garrison as president pending a full financial audit, Robert said. All in favor. 3 hands went up instantly. Valerie's face turned red, then white. She grabbed her purse and walked out, her lawyer hurrying after her. I'll contact our attorney about starting a formal audit, Deanna said. And we should probably report this to the police. Already ahead of you, I said. My lawyer is in contact with the Burlington Police Department's fraud division. They're interested in the case. The next few weeks were chaotic. The police did get involved, sending detectives to interview board members and homeowners. They subpoenaed the HOA's financial records going back 5 years. What they found was staggering. Valerie had been siphoning money from the HOA for over 4 years, not 6 months. The total amount stolen exceeded $120,000. She had set up fake companies, submitted fraudulent invoices, and even created email accounts to send herself approval notices that she claimed were from other board members. The special assessment she had tried to levy was indeed an attempt to cover the missing funds before the annual audit that was scheduled for March. She had been planning to blame the shortfall on unexpected maintenance costs and hope nobody looked too closely. In March, Valerie Garrison was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Her husband was charged as an accomplice, since his company had also received HOA funds for non-existent services. The story made local news, and the HOA became something of a cautionary tale about the importance of financial oversight in community organizations. The legal proceedings took months. My own lawsuit against the HOA for the gutter damage was settled quickly once Valerie was out of the picture. The HOA's insurance covered my repairs, and I received a formal apology from the board. They also agreed to reimburse other homeowners who had suffered damage due to the heated cable ban. In June, Valerie pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to repay the full amount stolen, plus penalties and interest. Her husband got 2 years and probation. Their assets were seized to cover the restitution, but it was unlikely the HOA would recover everything. The community held elections for a new board president. Robert Chen won easily, running on a platform of transparency and common sense. One of his first acts was to formally codify the heated cable policy. They were permitted, encouraged, and considered a standard safety feature like smoke detectors or carbon monoxide alarms. By the time the next winter rolled around, Maple Ridge estates looked different. Nearly every house had the telltale thin black cables running along the gutters. The neighborhood made it through the season without a single gutter failure, ice damage incident, or injury from falling ice. I was sitting in my living room one evening in January, a year after the gutter had crashed down and started this whole mess, when Tom knocked on my door. "Hey, Quinn, got a minute?" "Sure, come in. Want some coffee?" "Nah, I'm good. I just wanted to say thanks, man, for everything you did last year. Standing up to Valerie, exposing the theft, all of it. This neighborhood is so much better now." "I just didn't want my house to fall apart," I said, echoing what I had told Robert a year ago. "Yeah, but you could have just fixed your gutter and moved on. Instead, you made sure everyone else would be safe too. That took guts." After Tom left, I stood at my front window looking out at the quiet street. Snow was falling gently, accumulating on roofs and trees, but the heated cables hummed quietly, keeping the gutters clear and the ice at bay. The neighborhood was safe. The corrupt HOA president was in prison, and I could finally relax in my own home without worrying about violation notices or structural failure. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Mitchell, my lawyer. "Final reimbursement check from HOA cleared. You're all done with this mess. Congrats on surviving your first year of homeownership." I laughed and texted back a thank you. It had been quite a year. I had learned more about HOA bylaws, engineering principles, fraud investigation, and community organizing than I ever wanted to know. But I had also learned something important about standing up for what was right, even when it was easier to just comply and hope for the best. The heated cables continued their quiet work, melting ice before it could accumulate and cause damage. Such a simple solution to a serious problem, and it had taken a legal battle, a criminal investigation, and countless hours of stress to make it happen. But it was worth it. I thought about all the families in Maple Ridge estates who would sleep easier now, knowing their gutters wouldn't come crashing down in the middle of the night. The kids who could play in their yards without worrying about falling ice. The homeowners who wouldn't face thousands in repair bills because someone decided that safety features were unsightly. Spring came eventually, as it always does in Vermont. The snow melted, the heated cables were turned off, and the gutters did their job of channeling water away from foundations and walls. Everything worked exactly as it was supposed to. Robert Chen proved to be an excellent HOA president. He focused on actual community improvements rather than enforcing arbitrary aesthetic rules. The playground got new equipment. The common areas were landscaped beautifully. The pond was cleaned and stocked with fish. People actually started attending HOA meetings because they were productive and positive rather than opportunities for Valerie to scold everyone. I ran into Valerie's husband once, about 18 months after everything happened. He was coming out of a grocery store as I was going in. He looked older, tired, defeated. "Quinn," he said, nodding at me, "hello. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but Valerie was wrong about everything. The cables, the money, all of it. I went along because it was easier than arguing with her. That was my mistake." "Yeah, it was," I said. "There was no point in pretending otherwise. She's getting out in 14 months with good behavior. I got out last month. We lost the house, the cars, everything. I just wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did. You were protecting your home and your community." He walked away before I could respond. I felt a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. They had brought this on themselves, but the consequences had been severe. As they should be when you steal from your neighbors and endanger their safety for years. The second winter in my house was blissfully uneventful. The heated cables worked perfectly. No gutters fell, no ice damage, no violation notices. It was exactly how homeownership was supposed to be, peaceful and predictable. I did end up joining the HOA board myself, elected as treasurer in the spring elections. After everything that had happened, I figured I owed it to the community to help ensure nothing like Valerie's theft could happen again. I implemented new financial controls, quarterly audits, and transparent reporting that anyone could access online. It was boring work, but it was important. Mike Robertson from Frost Free Gutters sent me a Christmas card that second year. Inside, he wrote, "Thanks for making Vermont homes safer, one heated cable at a time. Business is booming and nobody's getting violation notices anymore. You did good, Quinn." I kept that card on my refrigerator. It was a nice reminder that standing up to bullies and thieves, even when it was difficult and stressful, could make a real difference. The community continued to thrive under new leadership. Property values actually increased because people wanted to live in a neighborhood where common sense prevailed over petty rules. New families moved in, and they were amazed when we told them stories about the old HOA regime. Wait, they tried to ban safety equipment. One new neighbor asked at a summer barbecue. "That's insane." It was, I agreed, but it's over now. Sometimes I still thought about that night when the gutter crashed down, nearly hitting my truck. It had been terrifying and infuriating, but it had also been a catalyst for positive change. If that hadn't happened, who knows how long Valerie would have continued stealing and imposing dangerous policies. The engineering reports Peter Chen had prepared became something of a local reference document. Other HOAs in Vermont started citing them when reviewing their own policies about winter safety equipment. Peter told me he had been contacted by homeowners associations across New England asking for consultations about reasonable rules versus safety requirements. "You started something bigger than you realize," he told me. HOAs all over the region are rethinking their policies because they don't want to end up like Maple Ridge Estates, with their president in prison and six-figure theft scandals. That was gratifying in a way I hadn't expected. The goal had been to protect my own home, but the ripple effects had spread far beyond my little neighborhood. 3 years after buying my house, I could honestly say I loved living in Maple Ridge Estates. The community was friendly, the board was functional, and my gutters were intact. The heated cables hummed away each winter, doing their quiet work, and nobody complained about them being unsightly. I had learned that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hard thing to do. Fighting the HOA had been stressful and time-consuming, but it had been necessary. And discovering the embezzlement, while shocking, had ultimately saved the community from even greater financial damage. Tom and I became good friends through all of this. We worked together on several board initiatives, including a community emergency preparedness program and a neighborhood watch. His kids started calling me Uncle Quinn, which made me laugh. "You know what the funny thing is?" Tom said one evening as we sat on his porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Valerie thought she was protecting property values with all her strict rules, but she was actually destroying them. The theft, the damage from banned safety equipment, the hostile environment she created, all of that was hurting the community." "Control freaks never see their own impact," I said. "They're too busy forcing everyone else to comply." "Thank God you didn't just comply," Tom said. "Most people would have. Maybe most people would have. I didn't think I was particularly brave or special. I had just been angry enough and stubborn enough to push back when pushed. And I had been lucky enough to have good documentation, a skilled engineer willing to help, and a community that was ready for change. The legal system had worked, eventually. The police had investigated thoroughly and professionally. The prosecutor had taken the case seriously. The judge had imposed appropriate sentences. It wasn't always that clean and satisfying, I knew, but in this case, justice had been served. Valerie did get out of prison after 14 months. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to New Hampshire to live with her sister. She had been permanently banned from serving on any homeowners association board as part of her probation conditions. That seemed appropriate. I never saw her again, and I was fine with that. She had caused enough damage, and everyone was better off with her gone. The heated cables continued to protect my home winter after winter. Such a simple thing, really. Thin black wires that melted ice and prevented disaster. But they had become a symbol of something larger. The principle that safety and common sense should prevail over arbitrary rules and aesthetic preferences. I thought about writing a book about the whole experience, the battle with the HOA, the discovery of embezzlement, the legal proceedings. But ultimately, I decided against it. The story had been told in news articles and court documents. Everyone who needed to know the lessons had learned them. Instead, I focused on being a good neighbor, a responsible board member, and a homeowner who took care of his property without drama. The heated cables did their job. The gutters stayed attached, and life went on peacefully. Looking back, I realized that buying a house had taught me far more than I expected. Not just about property maintenance and building codes, but about community, justice, and the importance of standing up for what was right. The heated cables had been the catalyst, but the real story was about people coming together to fix a broken system, and we had fixed it. Maple Ridge Estates was proof that even when things seemed hopeless, even when corrupt leadership seemed entrenched, change was possible. It just took someone willing to stand up first, to document the problems, and to push for accountability. 3 years, countless meetings, one criminal trial, and many winters later, my house stood solid and safe. The gutters gleamed in the summer sun, clear of ice and intact. The heated cables waited patiently for the next winter, ready to do their essential work. I had wanted a home, and I had gotten one. But I had also gotten something unexpected, a community worth fighting for, friendships forged in adversity, and the satisfaction of knowing I had made a real difference. The ice would come again when winter returned. But this time, we were ready. Every house in Maple Ridge Estates had its defenses in place. The gutters would hold, the roofs would stay intact, and nobody would face the terror of structural failure in the middle of the night. That was all I had ever wanted when I installed those first heated cables. A safe home, protected from the harsh Vermont winters. It had taken a battle to get there, but it had been worth every difficult moment. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I sat on my front porch, comfortable and content, knowing that my home was secure and my community was strong. The heated cables might have started the fight, but the people had won it, and that made all the difference.